No Scott, no sound for Scott. No sound. Joe.
Oh, yes, I see what's happening there. Let's do...
No sound.
Oh, my. It's, what happened here? Let me do this over again. Sorry. Oh, jeez. I have to get this right. Okay, we'll do it again.
Hello and welcome to this live presentation by Johannes Vloothuis. I'm Scott here with Artist Network, and we are happy to present to you this free live painting demonstration, The Invaluable Art of Negative Painting. Now, Joe is here to show you how crucial this skill is in advancing your work. You know, whether it's watercolor or oils or whatever medium you work in, understanding negative painting can be incredibly valuable. Now, if you like what you see here, you want to know that Joe teaches these on Artist Network as part of an ongoing paint-along series. So you can join him there, where for a really affordable price, you can learn some of the best skills to help bring your work forward and improve as an artist. So go to artistnetwork.com/paintalong, where you can learn more information about the next upcoming paint along event. And without further ado, here's Johannes Vloothuis.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for your introduction there, Scott. That's very kind of you. I feel very privileged to be working for Artist Network. It's a lot of reputation. Artist Network publishes, for those people that are new, Artist Network publishes art magazines and books, and they used to publish the Northlight books. So let's dig right in here, because we only have about 90 minutes. So I got here a little bit of a definition. I'm going to read it out loud to you. What is negative painting? This is for people that are sort of like beginners. They don't know what's going on. Negative painting is a technique commonly used where the artist creates a subject by emphasizing the space around it rather than painting the subject itself directly. In other words, negative painting involves painting in the background or the area surrounding the subject, which then defines a subject through contrast. So in other words, you can bring out a tree by using the blue sky and you carve into it. Why rely on negative painting? The echoes of our childhood. Now, this is the reason why I'm giving this talk right now. And I believe that this does not only apply to oil painters, it also applies to watercolors. It applies to all the mediums, because something special happens when you convert to the right side of your brain. You can Google that about the right side of the brain from artists, and you can see that there's been a lot of research on that. I'm not going to get into all that right now. But anyway, it says, why rely on negative painting? The echoes of our childhood drawings persist as muscle memory. Regrettably, the inclination to portray symmetrical forms that took root in those early years often endure. Regrettably, this ingrained predisposition can stifle our capacity to conceive captivating asymmetrical shapes. So when we were children, we used to produce round faces, triangular evergreen trees. And so this is to break that habit, that muscle memory that we have. Regrettably, a canvas wherein the sky melds with trees or mountains offers an opportunity to carve out superior designs. For watercolorists, this tool becomes a necessary crutch, ingeniously crafting shadows among foliage and rocks. It's worth noting that negative painting transcends into all artistic mediums. The application of this tool will increase your artistic intelligence. So let's get right into it. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to play a video that has excerpts of some negative painting I've done in all the mediums. And then after that, I'll do a couple of live demos. Okay, so let's start this now. So that should be, there's no sound, that you're only having my voice sound here. So this is a pastel that I recently did in a live class. And so what I'm doing here is I thought that tree was too intrusive in the painting. So I decided to cut into it, to carve out, to reduce some of that garishness of that orange tree. And so I'm painting right over it, and instead of trying to erase it. And you'll notice that when I do that, I won't get these the round part on top of the bush. You're able to carve in very nicely. So let's watch that a little bit. I noticed that during the chat, I caught someone was in Toronto. I'm in Hamilton, just like 60 kilometers from where you are. So welcome, neighbor.
Excuse me, Joe. They say we have distorted sound.
I don't know why. Jude, when Joe raises his voice, it's a bit loud. Joe, maybe Jude's is a bit loud. Okay, we'll keep adjusting it as we go.
Huh.
Mine's loud or Jude is loud?
I think it's me.
Okay, I'll just reduce it a little bit. Okay, so let's watch what's going on here. So what you're doing, what I'm doing here is I'm negative painting, meaning I'm painting in the reverse, like carving into the shape. By the way, these are just short excerpts. They're not longer than maybe 5 to 10 minutes each. We got two Joes here. Did you know that Joe had a twin brother? You can see two videos there. So I just superimposed the live one. There it is.
Too funny.
Hey, Maria, I lived in Mexico for 25 years. There's another person, Chrissy is from Mexico here too. Unless you're the same one. By the way, incidentally, this pastel was done, I'm doing some experiments. This was done on a violet underpainting. And I'm very happy with the results because some of that purple is showing through. And I'm doing this in oils and pastels as well. Next Saturday, that's exactly what we will be doing. I have a scene that I'm going to paint all the way from the beginning to the end. And I'm going to work on a pre-tone canvas with purple. I use dioxazine purple. Pues bienvenida, Mari. Yo hablo español. Si quieres escribir en español, yo te puedo contestar lo que quieres saber. I'm bilingual. I love engaging the people. You know, nothing like these live classes, right? Where you can just, wow, you're from Moscow, Nada. Wow. That's, what time is it there for you? Anyway, let me get back to my techniques here. I tend to socialize. If I get carried away, Jude, just put me right back on track again. Waterloo, that's another neighbor of mine. A lot of new people. Great.
Yeah, you want my job, I know.
Okay, so you can see that I was able to carve out that bush, but it doesn't have that sort of like roundness to it. It's got little indentations, and that creates a beautiful, realistic, well, let's say, there's no realism in this painting, but let's say convincing argument for a bush. Because we're always working with shapes anyway. Okay, so well, the next one will come up pretty soon here. So there you can see one of the advantages of negative painting is to make corrections like that. That's the finished painting, by the way. So here we're going to have another. This is a really good one. This is about rocks. So I have a technique where the first thing I do in watercolor, now negative painting is a must in watercolor. I know that many oil painters, they rely putting the positive on top of the positive. In other words, highlights on top of the darks. I don't work that way. I do want to increase my artistic intelligence. So what I do is I do the same thing. I do a lot of negative painting in pastels and in oils, and it ends up with a very nice sculpted, carved out feeling. So don't think that you want to get away from that just because you're in another medium. But anyway, watercolor, you have no other option. You have to learn how to negative paint. And that's why watercolor is difficult, because a lot of people need to learn that. Anyway, so this is my technique. What I do is I look at all the rocks, not so much individually, but I group them all together in a herd, so to say, what I call a mass. And all I do is I worry basically about the highlight, and then I throw in all these different colors to give it more life. Obviously, color in rocks in real life don't have all these colors. So you can see some purples in there, oranges, some pinks. Then after that, I start to do the carving out. Now, here's an important technique. Right now, you can see that I'm subdividing those stones into that mass into smaller ones. And I'm doing it quite a bit. Why? Because that's well within the boundaries of the painting. It's packed near the focal area. But the trick here is do not subdivide your rocks too many times. You can sort of get a glimpse of the photograph on the left-hand side. This is an excerpt from a live class. These are all done during live classes. Many times when you see all these rocks, they're going to be like marbles. They're approximately all the same size. They're all piled up together, and that becomes very busy. So right here, that's fine. But as I go to the larger forms, I won't subdivide as much. And the whole trick is to leave those huge rocks. So you want to have the big rocks and then small rocks and then the in-between. So now we just created a three-dimensional illusion to those rocks. So a question is, if painting reverse is like painting the shadows, that's right. You think more about the sense of shadows, and then you want to 3D everything. We're going to see examples with rocks, with trees, with grass. I've covered it all in this workshop. This is a lot of fun, by the way. When you see, there's a book that was written by Betty Edwards called Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. Every artist that's been into this seriously will have heard about that book. She made a big impact several decades ago. Where the argument she made is that you connect to the right side of the brain, which is in charge of the artistic creativity, where the left brain is more the scientific and logical brain. And so the advantage of when you do this negative painting, you're connecting to the right side of the brain, which is your artistic intelligence. So I have found that this is a very enjoyable process. Like I think there's certain endorphins that the brain releases when you're negative painting, and there's a lot of enjoyment to it. Because,
so what are you doing here? Are you breaking down your larger shapes into smaller ones?
Yeah, like I said earlier, what I do is I block in the entire mass without being concerned about the darks yet. I don't work rock by rock. I work the whole area first, and then after that I start to subdivide. And I do the same thing in oils, not just watercolor. And if you notice, I'm using a flat brush. I know a lot of my peers like to use round brushes. I just can't find that sort of carved out, sculpted feeling with the round brushes. I get that kind of look better with the square brushes. As you can see, like there's rocks really work out fine with that. So I've just given up trying to use round brushes.
Constance wants to know, is there a certain value that is better for the shadow or negative painting?
Well, you don't want to. You have to take into account that there's reflected light and there's the light coming from the sky. So you don't want to put that dark. And I used to have that bad habit, by the way, where I would put too dark of a shadow on my rocks, and it would look like the contrast was too strong. So you don't really have to go that dark. The thing is, you know what? Photographs are very deceiving, because anything that's near like a value 6 or 7 on the value scale, 10 being black, photographs will darken that to value 10 and make it black. So if you're not trained enough, what's going to happen is you will copy the darks from the photograph, and those sides of the rocks will appear much darker. And then their painting looks very fake, and you can tell people work from a photograph directly without knowing. That's one advantage of plein air painting, that your values are always going to be correct. So I don't want to go for that much of a dark contrast. I think I got it just right. Probably 1 or 2 values at the most. What do you mean by monovision, Kathleen?
Marie wants to know, when you use negative painting to define the rocks, do you take in consideration the light direction?
Yes, always. Normally artists will place the light either at 10 o'clock, and I don't mean 10 o'clock in the morning, I mean 10 o'clock in the position of a clock as a reference, like a compass, either 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock, so that whatever light strikes something, it strikes at about a 45-degree angle, and that's how you can determine your rock. So obviously the light's coming from the left-hand side. You don't have depth perception. You know, you don't need that, Kathleen. You don't need depth perception because you are working on a two-dimensional surface anyway. And so the advantage of that is you create the illusion through artificial techniques. You don't necessarily need, only if you were outdoors painting, you would have to be concerned about that. But if you're seeing things like two-dimensionally, then painting would be excellent for you.
Joe, we have several people who still feel your voice is distorted.
Well, it would have to be everybody or nobody if it was on my end. If some of you are hearing you maybe fine, it can't be me broadcasting. Maybe their speaker is too loud or something.
They're thinking maybe you're too close to your speaker. But if you're having problems, first try refreshing your screen. It's a little arrow on the left-hand side, the round arrow. Okay,
I have to interrupt you here. I purposely left this in the video, these rocks here, because that's one good way to learn. You go to a gardening center and you pick up these stones, and they resemble the big, large boulders. And so you line them up and move them around as a good practice. And you can see right now I'm doing just creating abstract shapes, and I'm not thinking in individual rocks. I'm piling them all together in one big shape. Okay, my sound is loud.
Joe, it seems to be a mixed group, so let's just try and turn your sound down, but I think that they may need to refresh. Try refreshing first. And if it's not good, then sign out and come back in. And if that doesn't work, then go to a different browser.
Okay, anyway, I just wanted to show you that really neat technique for putting rocks together. And then after that, you start to subdivide just like I did. There you go. There's the example. And so I'm varying colors. Every inch or so, I grab a new color. I go from the warm to the cool, back to the warm, back to the cool. And of course, I'm thinking in abstract designs that there's a habit, it's very easy to fall into the habit where you create parallel lines. And so every rock formation should be abstract. Abstract meaning you don't have symmetry, that one side leans in a different direction than the other side. They don't resemble triangles or squares or rectangles. Even though rocks do appear like that in nature, nature can get away with symmetrical shapes. If we do it, it looks fake. Yeah, and then besides, Jenny Lynn, there's no other option that you have with watercolor. What else can you do? But, like I said, this should become a habit for you, and go into your oils and your pastels and do the same thing. Don't paint one rock and then another rock and then another rock, because there's no unity that way. So it's better that you put it all in one big mass. It's easier for you to plan that way. And then later on, you go back and you start to carve them out. And that's exactly the word. You sculpt or you carve them out. And you create beautiful forms that way. Because, again, you're not tapping into the left brain that has a tendency of creating symmetrical shapes. Kathleen, one way to determine what an abstract shape is, some of you have taken workshops and read books. And there a lot of the instructors, they talk about abstract shapes or asymmetrical shapes, but I've never heard a definition of it. So I have a very, very nice way to define it and to determine what makes an attractive shape. Let's look at the rock, for example, that's on the, I can bring my pen here. On the left-hand side, the one that's darker. Here, I'm going to bring my tool up here. Okay, I'm moving that tool. You can see this rock here. A good way to get your hand out of there, Joe. My twin is putting his hand in there. Okay, so one way to determine, this is a really neat technique. Take an imaginary line down the middle of whatever form you're going to create, whether it's an evergreen tree, a deciduous tree, or rock. Down the middle, then mentally compare one side against the other, and the two sides of that shape have to be obviously different, not even remotely similar, but very obviously different, that if you were to put in a mirror, you would tell right away it's been flipped. That determines an abstract shape. So every time you're painting, you keep saying to yourself, what would happen if I compare both sides? And that ends that problem about, because every time you hear, your shapes have to be more abstract, create abstract shapes. But how do I know what an abstract shape is? There's your answer. Okay, that's the finished painting, the watercolor. Misty Day. That's at Yosemite National Park. Sculpting trees into 3D forms. Okay, so that was my positive shape. I believe a lot in lost and found edges. I will do a demonstration about that. But if you look at the contour of the trees in the background, you have, if you follow the top line of those trees, you'll notice that some areas are wet on wet, some are dry. Again, we hear a lot of talking from watercolorists about wet on wet and then dry on wet or wet on dry. But I feel that that's too limited, so I add one more. You got wet on wet, which creates the soft edges. You got wet on dry, which creates the sharp edges. But the third one is very important, which is lost and found edges. Because that creates the best looking line of them all. So here I'm negative painting out the building. So there we want a nice crisp edge, because buildings should not have soft edges. Trees can, but not buildings. Buildings and rocks should always be very their contour should be very well defined. Yeah, not only appropriate for all mediums, I think that people should create a habit of working from the two sides of the brain and engage that right side of the brain through negative painting. That will force you to become more intelligent, more artistically inclined to create better forms. And again, you can see me using a square brush. Most watercolor artists use a round brush there, but I can't. I just find that I get that carved out, sculpted feeling that way. Now, what's important here is I'm already starting to negative paint for the tree. Right now we have wet on wet. This is a very important tip here. You might want to write that down. So sorry if I sound like a teacher, but I am like that with my students. To consider the entire tree, and in my opinion, you want to have 2/3 light, 1/3 dark, or vice versa. 2/3 dark, 1/3 light. That way they don't compete. So here I am doing that lost and found edge. You got some of the parts bleed together, the darks are bleeding with the light, and there I'm doing hard edges, and that creates that beautiful form there. Some of it turns like a billiards ball, and other parts it looks like it's sculpted out. And that, for the eye finds that to be very entertaining to look at. And you can notice how I use my brush flat and then And then sometimes I use the very corner of it. Then I twist and turn it. I twist and turn that brush a lot. That's why I don't like the round brushes, because I feel like I get too much of a uniform line. Whereas with these bright brushes, by rotating it clockwise and counterclockwise, I get variations of forms and shapes. So again, you can see some of the soft edges and some of the hard edges developing there. So right in here, this bleeds together nicely. And then this is a hard edge over there. So the way this works is, I've come up with a concept that's so important. I can't get into all of it right now, but hopefully some of you next Saturday will join us for the full painting, where I can go into more detail. But I came up with a concept that I think is huge. It's called principle of contrasts. And it really makes a big difference if you understand that concept. So the way it works is you entertain the viewer through variations in one form. So for instance here, we get that bleeding effect. And then right next to it, we create hard edges. That contrast between the both of them is what is very entertaining to the viewers. You don't have only soft edges, you don't have only hard edges. That's right, Cheryl. Bright brushes are shorter. So we're going to put those tree trunks in. And the other tree in the back, you see the one next to it? That has some like ultramarine blue with atmosphere perspective. I'm not going to negative paint that. You know why? So that we precisely get the principle of contrasts. If I define some of the lights and darks in the one in front, and I don't touch the one in the back, it's sending you a message that the one in the back has no negative painting, meaning it goes further back into the distance. So the one that seems to be sculpted looks good because it's contrasted with one that's not sculpted. And the one that's not sculpted or doesn't have the carving in looks good because it's contrasted against the one that does look sculpted. So somehow the human eye likes to see those comparisons. We constantly make these comparisons. Cheryl, it'll probably get to around 15,000 over the time. The video. All my videos have built up over 14,000 people. So here I'm putting the tree branches in, and I'm taking advantage of the dark areas to do that. I skipped the highlight, as you saw that I just did that. And so there you go. It's a very simple watercolor symbol. When you're painting, especially with watercolors, you can't afford to look for realism in landscape painting. You want to think that's the finished painting, by the way. You can see I got that also negative painting on the tree on the right. I love carving out evergreen trees in the distance. So the first thing I'm going to do here is put the snow in shadow, and then negative paint in the evergreen boughs. This is a lot of fun. Yes, you are correct, Kathleen, about adding less detail for things that are further away. But the detail, but also the opposite is true. Be careful, because there's this misconception that the foreground should have a lot of detail because it's closer to you. And that's not the way it works in real life, and that's not the way it works in painting. Your detail should go where the eye is looking directly, not at your feet, not on the sides, but somewhere in the middle ground. So again, this is another topic for another day, but a good recipe for success is do not define anything in your foregrounds. Hola Manuel, ¿cómo están las cosas en Guadalajara? I have to show off my Spanish here. You can't blame me. It cost me 25 years of learning it.
You or show off, are you using synthetic brushes primarily?
These are, that one's synthetic, but the other one I used is called a Scepter Gold, which is partially synthetic and then partially natural. So the brush holds the spring, but at the same time carries a lot of water, whereas the synthetic brushes don't hold enough water. It's nice to see people from 3 people so far from Mexico here, and then from Moscow. Wow, I don't remember seeing anybody from Russia, right, Jude? Before?
No, but we do have several from Brazil. We have them from all over today.
Otro de Colombia. Vaya, vaya.
Okay, talk to us about evergreens. What do we do with the 2 different sides? How do we achieve that?
Oh, great. One thing that, again, this is a topic for another day. Hopefully you will join. I have some very important information that I can share with you. One of the most important concept of all painting, all artwork. I have never read it in books and never heard it out from my own classes, which is called the different kinds of lines. So one of the lines that you want to avoid is a zigzag line, because it's monotonous. It's too repetitive and boring. And evergreen trees do have these zigzag lines. So you have to alter the realism and create a newborn shape whose lines are like more of a pendulum. So I have to make sure that I don't get too many of those zigzags, just enough to give you the idea what it is. Now in this case, Jude, I can get away with it more because I have snow sitting on top of those boughs, so I won't get that exaggerated zigzag kind of contour.
Okay, that's important to know.
Yeah.
So Christine just posted, you probably want to do more like a pendulum line.
Yeah. It's like Rockin' My Baby sort of line. Again, we'd have to do those in other classes with more examples. Where do you apply it?
You'll find that as we go through today, Joe will be giving out principles. And most of those principles, we try to attach a cute little catchy name so that you will remember it when you start painting.
Yeah, but you need to see examples.
My baby.
Yeah, I know, and I do some ridiculous. My son studied, advertising in college. And I said, can you give me some tips to have my students memorize all these sophisticated techniques? And he says, give them silly ideas. That they do that in commercials, like different TV commercials. You say, well, that was silly, right? I'm not going to give names because I don't want to slander, but most of them are like that. So he says, just do things like sing something, give a ridiculous kind of visual, and they will remember it. So I did that with the pendulum line, is pretending you're rocking a baby, and that creates a nice eye movement, and that you get that on the contour of the evergreen tree rather than the zigzags. It sticks in people's minds.
So they're saying, so you paint the whole contour with the snow color first, and
right.
Then you go back into it?
Yeah, that's the idea. This is a further away one. I'm going to show you another one where it's closer up. But that's, how else are you going to do evergreen trees in watercolor? And you can see there that the snow is sticking on it nicely, and we have the boughs peeking from under it.
But your snow isn't white.
No, because that's vertical, so that we got because the light is behind us, and so the snow on top of that tree is vertical, so it won't be getting the sunlight. Besides, you need to contrast that with the ground anyway. Sherry. Yeah, people have criticized me for taking away the no-fly zone and use the peripheral area. Oops, I got my fountain pen there. So anyway, you watercolorists, you're learning how to create snow-covered evergreen trees, and watercolor. But I would do the same thing with oils. I do rely.
Pastels. And
Yeah, I do. Not always. I just depends what I'm in the mood for that day. But I do work back and forth quite a bit in oils and pastels. Positive shape, negative shape, positive shape, negative shape. I love to, especially when it comes to deciduous trees, I basically do the same application that I do with watercolor because it gives me a sculpted kind of feeling to it. Or look.
Why do you do the positive to negative shape, going back and forth? Why?
My brain just works that way. I enjoy going back and forth.
So you get better abstract shapes?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah, not maybe. That's a fact. I'm a little bit unorthodox. Most artists work, they build light on top of dark, and I tend to go back and forth. I can sometimes put the highlights of a tree with all the highlights first, and then go in and sculpt in the dark shadows later. And I'm going to demonstrate that with watercolor. But I do that in oils as well. Yes, Angel, this gets recorded. It always remains on YouTube. There's other YouTube videos of mine on there too. This is a lot of fun. And I'm variegating the colors there. Now you can see I add a little bit purple to the snow, which you don't see with the eye, but I'm putting flavor into the the shadows that are in snow. That's right, Naomi. You put the snow in first, the negative paint under that. You'll notice that the more you negative paint, the fewer symmetrical shapes you're going to produce. Here, I can do this. Next Saturday, Naomi, I'm going to do a watercolor with quite a few trees that's only going to rely on negative painting. And you'll see that they have this very appealing, well, that is if I succeed. But they always have this very appealing carved out, sculpted look to it. Like you really know what you're doing. Sort of look.
So what I'm hearing, Joe, is the reason to do negative painting is so that you get negative abstract shapes.
Correct.
Is that the only reason?
Well, in watercolor, you have no other option because you have to put the dark silver lights. But if I'm going to do pastels and oil, yes. The reason I do that is because I get a more sculpted look to my work, more artistic looking, rather than just piling heaps of highlights on top of darks. And besides, you don't create mud by mixing in, trying to put highlights on top of darks. You'll start to mix in with the bottom layer, and it gets sort of like muddy. This also gives you a cleaner look. Okay, now I'm adding a little bit more of a darker shadow on that right-hand side of the tree. So I'm putting the indentations where you could look under the boughs. Now there are other boughs. I didn't do it in the ones in the distance because they're further back. So you don't want to do the same technique that you do in a foreground, the middle ground. You don't want to echo that in the background. Or if I'm doing that technique in the foreground, putting the darks, I stay away from that in the middle ground so that the two planes don't crowd each other. That's a good tip too. Note that the middle ground over here, there's no negative, well, the only negative painting I have there is between the snow, but I'm not putting these kind of darks in there, back there. And that automatically sends it back into the distance. If I start to take this technique here and apply it back here, they'll look like they're only 5 feet in the back, rather than going back, let's say, 100 yards or 200 yards. So that's a good technique, too, to know. Landscape painting, what helped me in my career is I wasn't happy with workshops, and I wasn't happy with reading. I felt that there was too much repetition of the same information. And I watched these other pros do these beautiful paintings, and I wanted to do the same. I think we all have had that inkling, right? So what I did is I resorted to reverse engineering, which means by studying, let's say, 30 top artists, I came to the conclusion of the common denominators, what makes each painting click. And so I compiled all those, and I ended up with about 220 pointers, which I'm very eager to share with you without reserve, so you get this information, because your paintings are going to be only as good as how many of these tips that you know. Okay, so to bring out that snow nicely, I'm negative painting in. There's like a little bit of escarpment there, and so I'm painting around to bring out that snow.
Erkin is asking, isn't it too detailed for a foreground tree?
Detail is not the problem, Erkin. The problem is distractions. That's a very good statement there. One thing that I encourage is I shouldn't say, and if I ever do, Jew, please correct me so I'm not misleading. I don't want to ever say don't put detail in the foreground, because that would be false. The statement should be, don't put distractions in the foreground. What creates a distraction? Strong value light contrasts, hard edges. That's it. I think only those two. I can put, if I do a foreground, I want to put a candy wrapper on the ground, and somebody threw away a bottle of Coca-Cola on the ground. I can put all that in my foreground. All of those details, as long as the values are so close together that you pole vault over that into the middle ground, that you don't get stuck visually or stopping in that foreground. So detail is not the problem, it's distractions. So you want the eye to comfortably look into the middle ground to process the visual information. So you could say that the foreground is the music in the song, and the voice of the singer is in the middle ground. So you keep your values somewhat close together. And obviously, if your values are close together, then your edges are not going to be hard edges anyway. Just, again, the idea is don't create distractions in your foreground. And another thing is that those houses are going to be pretty powerful in the middle ground. There's a finished painting. So you assess that. You can see that there's discordant colors in those houses, the red door. Do you really feel distracted by those evergreen trees in the foreground?
Can you talk a little bit about optical soft edges?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of references to hard edges and soft edges, but there's something that's called, I go, again, as always, I go one step further than that. I talk about an edge. You can have two hard edges together. Let's say you have a night sky and you have a dark tree. All those edges can be hard edged, but optically they won't appear hard edged because the values are close together. So if I put two edges that are close together in value, I don't have to soften the edge. It's already going to be soft. But if I put, let's say, a dark tree against a white sky or a white cloud, I'm going to have to really go out of my way and soften it big time so that it seems like it's not just cut out and pasted on. Subjects that have hard edges look like they're cut out and pasted on. You don't want that in your paintings. The distraction here would be the Christmas lights on the trees. Kathleen, you could make it into a Christmas scene, and then you can put the focal area in the foreground. Let's say you do a night scene, right, Kathleen? Let's turn this into a night scene. So you put the Christmas lights on, let them radiate onto the snow. That becomes your focal area. And then the houses in the back would become a subordinate focal area. So yes, you can do that.
Are we looking at another example of
A bit closer up.
Evergreens?
Yeah, this was just a short one. It's closer up.
If I remember correctly, this one has some really great brush strokes.
Yeah, that's why I wanted
Joe as he's painting.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to show it.
Brush strokes are a sign of a pro. Watch this. He twists and turns his brush. Very infrequently does he use the tip of it.
And you can see that I'm throwing in different colors. There's a little bit of pink in there, a little bit of purple, a little bit of blue. I don't believe in copying nature's colors. I believe in improving nature's colors. You can see that very much on the left-hand side. You can see some touches of green, some purple, some blues, even a few grays in there. And yeah, I wanted to show that because of the brush strokes.
Yeah, they're great. Yvette, I need to know a little bit more what you want to know about the sky. What is your question regarding the sky?
You mean a skyscape? I think that's what Yvette is referring to. Not the sky being the main subject. What I can tell you about that, Yvette, is that's called mass planning. Again, all of these questions can be answered very thoroughly during the regular classes, but I'll do the best I can now. In the 90-minute, it's going to be a little bit more than 90 minutes, probably about an hour and 45 minutes. But what you do is called mass planning. And you say to yourself, what is my painting about? It's like sort of like a movie. Is it a romantic movie? Is it an action movie? Is it a war movie? So you stay focused on that. And so if it's you call it a skyscape. If that's true, then at least 66% of your pictorial space should be dedicated to the sky. And then you devote the other 33% to the ground. So let's say a seascape would be a good example. You can have a seascape that could take up, let's say, 70% of your pictorial space, or you can change that and make the horizon line of the sea very low, let's say to about 1/3 of the height of the canvas, and then the 2/3 of your painting will be a skyscape. Does that answer your question? What you don't want to do is you don't want to show the ocean, the sky, everything in equal proportions.
I'm kind of imagining her question had to deal with negative painting within a skyscape.
Oh yeah, with watercolor, yeah, it's fantastic.
Especially around your cloud shapes, and your trees.
No, you can make some beautiful watercolor skies that way. Next Saturday, I believe I'll have time. If you join the classes, I'll demonstrate how to do clouds against a blue sky in watercolor. But I can tell you the same thing that applies to deciduous trees. I love to play with hard and soft edges. So you let some of the eye focus on some of the hard edges in the clouds, strategically placed, and then some will just bleed right into the blue skies. Right now, that's the blue snow. That's the blue part of the snow of these trees.
So typically in watercolor, you go light to dark.
Yeah, you have no other option. You must negative paint. You must master negative painting in watercolor. Still in oils, you can get away with doing positive on top of positive, even though I'm saying, and I insist, that if you incorporate negative painting into your oils and pastels, your paintings will look more sculpted, more designed, more assertive. Mar, this is a 3/4 inch scepter gold, which are very rare to get now. But basically, like I said earlier, I don't use round brushes with watercolor. And that because I get more irregular shapes with these brights, which are like square heads.
No, he's got wet brush on dry paper right now.
Correct. Okay, now we're going to do the negative painting. This I have to say. Note where I started. See, Jude, sometimes I'm doing this subconsciously, and remember, you're really good at narrating what I do, but I started at the eye level. In other words, if I'm standing there and looking forward, instead of starting my negative painting at the top or at the very bottom, I started where your head would be looking straight, because the visual information you can bring in, you can support all the detail at eye level. You want to subtract detail at the very top and at the very bottom. So that's why I started there first, so I can get busy if I want. Right there I can get busy. So I'm not concerned about overdoing it in that exact spot. Mars, say that again. By the way, I like the way these you guys are totally incorporated in the chat there, and I'm really interested. It really motivates me, Mar, that you ask all these questions. You know, it makes you feel like a teacher. Say that again. Fewer negative shapes. You got to rephrase that, my friend.
What value? How do we know what values to use for a negative painting?
Well, you just don't want to go too dark. That appears that way on the video, but in the original painting, it's not that dark. Besides, it's still wet. You should. Here's the technique. No shape. Again, if you guys want to write this down, I strongly recommend it, because these are the recommendations I'm giving, and I do sound like a school teacher here, but I know how difficult this is, and I know how much I want to convey this information to you. Because it's not common to get this kind of information. The photographs will give you black areas that you might take for granted to be truthful. But if you compare the photograph to the plein air scenario, you're never going to get those blacks. There's no such thing as a dark in nature in which you cannot determine the hue. So we carry this. If you're only a photograph painter, you're going to carry this into your landscapes. And I've seen that too many times. So the secret is no shape in your landscape should be darker than the value 7, 10 being black. Because you can always identify the color or the hue at that value. Once you go into value 8, you're going to lose the color identity. You can go dark for accents, but you can always, as long as you can put your finger on it and say that's a green, that's an orange, that's a blue, your values are going to be okay. If you put your finger on it and you cannot determine what it is, you know you went too dark.
Kathleen's asking, then no true black?
Well, sometimes in watercolor you will get accents that will end up looking black, but try to stay away from it. You don't have to go that dark. But you can see now that the paint is starting to dry where I started, and you can put your finger on it and say, that's a green. It's a dark green, but that's a green. I hope that answers your question. Boy, I just love the way this group is engaging today. Isn't it something? It's more than normal.
Barbara was asking, what about acrylics? Do you do
all the same thing? My message to you is train your brain to do negative painting, and you will increase your artistic intelligence, period. No matter what the medium is. LB, I have done at least 400, probably more, paintings outdoors, because I bought a motorhome and I traveled to practically all the national parks in the US and Canada to do a plein air painting for months in a row. And on my website, oh, by the way, you want to take this into account. You want to write down my website so you can look at my work and see upcoming courses and sign up for the newsletter so that we can be in touch. It's improvemypaintings.com. If someone, yeah, thank you, Jude. You just posted it there. Improvemypaintings.com. You can find me, or on our Artist Network as well. The only thing you have to navigate a little bit through Artist Network. And then also you can sign up in my Facebook page. You can click on that at the bottom of my website.
Junior M is asking, what about silhouettes in a painting? Do you still use a hue? Okay, I'll get there in a minute.
By the way, you can email me questions after this session, and I will help you answer them. Go ahead and do so. Well, I don't get bombarded with hundreds and hundreds of them, but if you have something that's been bugging you about landscape painting that you have not found an answer, believe me, you will find it with me. So go ahead and type, send me an email and I'll be glad to answer. I won't charge you for that. I just want to keep in contact with the artists. Now, what is it here? What about silhouettes? JR, I want you to think that way where when you're creating shapes, think in terms of silhouettes. That's a good way to look at it. You know what the problem is? It's the transition from the photograph to the painting, where all the problems are. That's why you people are seeking for answers. That in-between twilight zone is where all the problems are. Because nature does not respect compositional purposes. It's poor on shapes. It's monochromatic. And so when somebody is painting from a photograph or even plein air painting, you won't hit it on the head. Plein air painting helps a little bit with values, but not much. Okay, so what we artists do is we create what is called representational shapes. An evergreen tree is not a copy of an evergreen tree. Rocks are not copies of rocks. I think the only thing that would be close to a copy would be seascapes, a crashing wave. But for everything, we have to create a new symbol. And I also sometimes refer to that as silhouettes. So think of your trees, you're creating a silhouette that's a symbol. I hope that answers your question. How do you keep your, from what Cindy, what medium are you talking about? Watercolor? Doesn't matter if it dries. With acrylics, you spray it every 15 minutes with a little mist bottle. The map is not the terrain rule applies. You're going to have to rephrase that, Kathleen, please. I can see that you got some questions up trying to find out answers, and that's very cool. So hopefully I can give them all to you right now.
Or we encourage you to join us on Saturdays. We have lots of time on Saturdays to do additional demos and really go into thorough answers.
No, and I'll do as much as I can now. I'm not holding back. You know, right, Jude? I don't hold back. I can give you as many answers as I can now.
Right. So Joe doesn't put out fresh watercolor for each painting. He puts it into the little area and lets it harden and then sprays it ahead of time.
That's correct. What I do is when I buy my tube of watercolor paints, I just squeeze the whole tube inside the wells and just let it dry like mud after it's dried after rainfall. And so I'll just wet them a little bit on top.
Nick has an interesting question.
Very interesting question.
How do you know when to follow nature and when not to?
Nick, never. Bottom line is never. Unless you get those occasional trees or rocks that are good looking, but let's say hardly ever. Painting outdoors is an inspiration. Evergreen trees are too monochromatic. Green trees are monochromatic. Rocks are poor shapes. They're muddy grays. The only thing that you can follow from nature that you can trust 100% would be your values, because you're never going to get a black value during a day scene, overcast or not. So to refrain you from getting too dark. That is true. By the way, I have courses on my website called at improvemypaintings.com. There is one on plein air painting, a whole lecture that I gave for about 2 hours on plein air painting, the pros and cons and what to stay away from, what to do. And then some demos, real demos outdoors. Well, there's a lot of courses on my website, improvemypaintings.com, but I encourage you to try to register for this coming up Saturday. You know what? We have the best fee of all the sources out there in the market. Nobody can get even close to what we charge. $14.99 for 5 hours next Saturday, and the course after that, $24.99 for 15 hours in 3 Saturdays. Now, who can beat that? And you know why? Because we have hundreds and hundreds of artists. We don't have to charge a lot. It's a volume number.
Paul is saying, but what about painting well-known sites?
Well, I'll give you an example. I have a friend in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. His name is Jim Wilcox. He's probably the most successful artist in the United States. He has 2 galleries on his name, and he sells like crazy. If you compare the tip of the Teton to his paintings, he will alter it so that it doesn't look symmetrical. So when it comes to landmarks, unless you're painting, of course, the Statue of Liberty, but when you're talking about a mountain, first of all, nobody has a photographic memory that they're going to compare the peak of a mountain in, let's say, the Grand Teton versus the painting. So you alter it slightly to create better shapes, correct? But as long as the area is recognizable, you're in the clear. And he sells paintings for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, even more. And he will alter the scene. In fact, there's an area that's called the Sleeping Indian, and Jim Wilcox has put a stream in there that doesn't exist. He puts trees that don't exist in the scene because he uses artistic license. And yes, he is the creator of the Soltec. Yeah, but my next class, thank you, Julie. My next class this Saturday is going to be a follow-up of this demonstration. So we put it into practice together. So again, you can see I'm subdividing using abstract designs and a lot of colors. I just wanted to do an oils to prove it to you that you can do it as well. We're not far from being over here. My classes are the first 3 Saturdays of every month, basically.
But you're starting it with a breakthrough, so yes, I think we will be full in September. It will be a full Joe month.
You know, another thing is I'm starting to incorporate more and more purples in my artwork. You see those beautiful purple colors in the rocks? It takes that boring grayness away, and that you don't see in real life. Now here I'm sort of making a mistake, which I correct later. I'm subdividing too many times. Again, the principal contrast would be one large form, then medium form, and then small forms. I also confess my errors. Everything gets recorded, Peter, and downloadable too. Hey, Chrissy. I see names that some of my students go back almost 13 years with me. And that is very motivating. 13 years taking the classes. And I think it's just because they enjoy to see the paintings unfold. They know it all by now. Right, guys? You know it all. You just like to enjoy the unfolding of the paintings.
It doesn't really matter what the medium is for this Saturday's course coming up.
It's going to be watercolor. Yeah.
It will be applicable to all mediums. You can apply it to all mediums.
There's a finished painting, by the way. Look how many purples I put on the rocks. Yeah, that's why I did this again, this demonstration with oils, to prove to you. Okay, I think this is our last little 5-minute sequence here, how you create grass in watercolor. Negative painting, so you just chop them in, and you only do it in a very small area, like maybe 2 or 3 inches at the most. That's all you do with the grass. You don't do the whole field. That's the secret, and the mind fills in the rest. Because it's tricky to do grass in watercolor, and many artists leave that out. They just put that blank rug on top. I don't like to do that because it does look like a rug. So I like to do a little bit of negative painting here, a hint, to get those grass clumps.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. Julie's posting about this Saturday's course is 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Yes. Again, go to my website, improvemypaintings.com, and you'll find all the information, and it takes you to the registration link. Look at these beautiful comments from these guys. Look at that, Jude.
Well, we love you guys too. You're our art families. We think you're great.
Yeah.
Really, truly. You know, there aren't many of these sorts of things out there to say that they can say they have an art family.
Well, Kathleen is really inquisitive. I love her. Keep going. It's a call. Come on, Sherry. That's not a fair assessment. You dropped out of it.
Yes, it's a cult. Oh, she's so naughty today. Okay, so Kathleen, how do you correct overblending of a color without overworking the canvas?
You know what? The secret to that, as much as in watercolor, just intermingle the colors on your palette. Don't mix the colors on your palette. I'm very much against using the palette knife and mixing colors thoroughly on the palette because you don't get those little subtle variations. I like to let them like touch together, like mingle together, and then scoop them with the brush, even if you got 2 or 3 colors on your brush, and go directly on the canvas, and you'll get these subtle variations of color rather than doing the cement mixing on the palette. Okay, I think we're done. Oh, we got one more. This is very quick. Negative painting with pan pastels. Have you heard about pan pastels? It's relatively a new medium. Now, you can see, I wanted to put this on purpose because, first of all, I created a symmetrical tree, so my left brain got involved there. Oh, important. When you're negative painting a tree, for example, don't do more than 1/3 or 2/3. Don't go half dark, half light.
I'm looking at my tree to see if I did that.
Well,
yep, we're good.
You're good.
See, that's why we keep going over these principles again and again and again. We want you to do them when you pick up that brush.
What medium are we talking about, Kathleen? I'm gonna do a live demonstration as soon as this is over. I'm gonna give you the technique, step by step, for doing watercolor. And I say the technique. I'm a little bit boastful, but that's confidence. See, look how that looks carved out. Now we're creating a 3-dimensional object there. And did you notice again, I started at the eye level and then worked my way up and worked my way down. And again, that square head applicator from Pan Pastels favors me a lot because of that. Now I still have a symmetrical shape there. So I'm going to use negative painting to make the correction. But look how it gives you that very nice carved out feeling. There, I'm talking to my students there about this, making it look round. Yeah, all these classes get recorded, Michael, and you can download them on an external hard drive for you to keep forever and ever. I have done 430 paintings with my students so far in the last almost 13 years. Wow, that's a big number. So I'm going to send that. See, I'm negative painting that in the distance there, sending it further back. Remember, we're creating symbols. We're not creating tree with leaves, and we don't create trees with leaves. We create symbols or silhouettes. All the top artists will do that.
Okay, so here you're negative painting not with a dark, with a light or a mid-tone.
I'm sending some atmospheric perspective into that. Suzanne says, I have a basic set of pan pastels, so do I need to mix them? Yeah, if you have the basic one, I think it's 20. Yeah, you're going to have to mix them. You know what you can do, Suzanne? let's say you double load your applicator, half of it with ultramarine blue and the other half with burnt sienna, and you sort of like twirl it on the paper, and they'll mix on the paper. And the solution to that, since you can't mix on the actual palette, is to double or triple load your applicator. Okay, we should be done by 4:15, which gives me a little bit of, well, like I said, we'll be in probably another an hour 45 minutes.
So the next class this coming Saturday is on negative painting. Have you decided what the 3-week course is about, Joe?
I already know what it's about.
You want to give us a
Well,
hint?
it's not posted yet, but it's they're going to post it next Saturday. It's about waterfalls.
Ooh, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's true, Jenny. It's called negative. I can see you're quite knowledgeable. Just by that one comment, I can perceive how advanced you are. It's negative painting within negative painting is correct. So you go one value, and then you go another value into that. Maybe my voice is too loud. I get excited, BL, and then I start to speak loud. So look at those beautiful forms. Now I'm refraining from the detail. Okay, there's a very important concept too. That is that tree that's on the right hand side. That's called the peripheral area. And you can see that I'm subtracting the same kind of technique from that tree because it's in your periphery. So I teach something that's called paint the way your eye anatomically sees. And I'm very much against this cliche. Those are carved out oil paintings, by the way. See the carved out feeling? They're symbols. No leaves almost. Except maybe a few of them here and there, but not within the middle part of the tree. So it's I'm very much against the cliche of paint what you see because it's very misleading. It's paint the way the eye anatomically sees, which means the peripheral areas of your painting, you leave them alone. Or you subtract detail. Okay, I think we're done.
Scott says it was just released.
What was just released?
Their waterfall.
Oh, great, Scott. I was expecting it to go up on Saturday. It's already, so you can register in both of the courses now. The one coming this Saturday and the one that's coming on September the 9th.
So the one on September the 9th and then the next 2 Saturdays after that, Joe does 1 Saturday in oils, 1 in watercolor, and 1 in pastels. But we tell you, again, you can ask, if you're painting the oil one in watercolor, you can ask watercolor questions. We answer it.
Waterfalls in all 3 mediums. There's going to be oils, pastels, and watercolor. Yeah, $24.99 for the 3 Saturday course of 5 hours each. $14.99 for the coming up Saturday of 5 hours. I know there's a little bit of a discrepancy in price there, but that's the way it's done. Still, one way or another, it's a tremendous value. Okay, now here's another secret. When you start putting your tree trunks, the bottom third of your tree, be emphatic. In other words, go for it. Put all the little branches in as you see me do. Then you climb up to the second third. You taper off on your branches. And don't put any on the top third of your tree. That way you get what is called the principle of contrasts. The tree trunk at the bottom looks good because you don't have one competing at the top. The tree, and then you can see it really works well because the eye starts to compare the form from top to bottom. This is pan pastel, Kathleen. By the way, I didn't catch your medium, Kathleen. Could you? I probably went by me. What did you see her medium, Jude, that she typed?
I think she said watercolor, Joe.
Okay, yeah. Watercolor always needs a lot of step-by-step. Good. My demonstration I'm going to do today will have a step-by-step. You have difficulty painting on the top half. I think you're referring to oils, F4. The solution to that is use a alkyd white, such as Gamblin quick drying white, and that's the end of your headache once and for all. Okay, we're done with the video. Let's put the live demo on. Yay! Here we go. Here goes our first one. Okay, so this is watercolor. Rough paper works the best for foliage. And I did just a very quick outline with pencil. Let me get rid of that. The text there, we don't need that. There we go, nice and clean. And we'll put my video up. There. Alrighty, so you want to write down these steps. Step number 1, wet your brush and spot wet. This is the way to do foliage in watercolor. Spot wet. Spot wet inside, but leave dry areas, and you're going to see why shortly.
Spot wet where, Joe? Where are you talking?
In the middle, in the middle of some of the, here, this is the contour. So tap, skip and tap. Spot wet. Not everything wet, not everything dry. You're going to see, I'll show you why later on, why I'm doing that. Be a little bit more emphatic with the water on the shadow side of the tree. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm leaning over. You can see in my video, I'm leaning almost my ear on the table so that I can see how wet it is. You don't want the puddles. In the meantime, I'm going to start mixing the paint. We can make this an orange tree. Let's make it into an autumn tree. So this is what we talked about the mixing the colors. I think it was you, Kathleen, that asked. So here goes raw sienna. And then I'm going to put a little bit of cadmium orange on the side. This is the idea of mixing. Even a little bit of permanent rose. Okay. So we're going to do the highlights first. Let me just take away some of these droplets. Normally I let it just sit there, let it absorb into the paper, but since we're in a hurry. So the secret is don't over mix in your palette. Oh, you can't see the palette. Okay, I'll bring it up here. There it is. So 3 mounds of paint. And the trick is scoop like this, opposite to the direction of your bristles, because you bring up more paint that way. Watch this. So I got 3 colors in my brush. I am not mixing on my palette. That's the secret for watercolor. It's already partially mixed within the brush anyway. So now I'm going to do is tap. It's a little bit too runny yet. I can make adjustments. Look, I'm pushing against the bristles. Against the bristles. That will give you that broken up effect. I still want a little bit of bleeding in there.
What's these brush strokes? And yes, he did say rough paper is best for foliage dominant works, precisely, Janelle.
Yeah, because you get more broken up paint that way.
Look at these brush strokes against the grain of the brush.
And even you turn your brush this way.
And he's belly brushing today, it looked like.
This will solve your watercolor foliage once and for all, folks. Yeah, I'm starting to get some bleeding there. That's what I want. Even this way, look, I'm using all my edges of the brush to get, so I don't get repetitive patterns. I'm not mixing my paint on the palette. There should be one predominant color, by the way.
Marianne wants to know, is your favorite watercolor?
Well, watercolors is more stressful, obviously, but when you do the watercolor right, it looks really good compared to the other mediums.
Look at that. Look at those brush strokes. We never see that in other classes, ever. Look at that. Against, and look at the dry brushing results. Beautiful. One thing Joe always says is never judge your trees until, finish that, you students who know the answer.
Until you put
never judge your trees until.
Now, even the corners, see, watch this. Boom. I want more bleeding in there. I need that bleeding. I need lost and found edges.
Dog, for the camera, Joe has it at a very slight angle, just for the camera.
And I guess I'll just put a little bit of green grass there too, just to give it, put it into context.
Your floaties, you're putting in lots of floaties today.
Make that into a vignette.
Very good, Debbie. We knew you would know the answer. So do not judge your trees until you put in the trunks and the branches. Very good.
Debbie always has the answer. We took her in as a beginner, right, Jude?
Was she a beginner?
Oh, yeah. Remember?
Yeah, I remember at the workshop.
Yeah.
Debbie with her pearls. Love it. What kind of brush are you using right now, Joe?
Same one.
And he just fixes his brushes. He just cleans his brushes with regular dish soap and a little water. And then you can put the hairs back together then. Or he has another little trick for his brushes that splay. What do you use on them, Joe?
What's that again? Sorry.
What do you use on your brushes when they get all splayed out?
You can use a beard trimmer and restore them, especially the oil brush. Watercolor brushes will last you for 20 years, but the oil brushes will wear down very quickly. Okay, so let's put some tree branches in there. Wait, I should start the negative paint now. Yeah, because you want lost and found edges on that too. Okay, so the spot wetting. Okay, I'll tell you later because I need to put this in right now. So we're going to go one value or so darker. And I'm going to use a smaller brush for that now, but still it's a square brush.
Yeah, the problem is it's probably drying faster than you want it with these lights. Lost and found edges.
Yeah, it's still a little bit too wet. Still a little bit too wet, so I'll proceed with the branches instead.
Your lost edges signify that part of the tree is going back into the background.
Yeah, we're gonna once I get it in there, we're gonna show them that.
Okay, I'll shush.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. Now, nature will give you many more branches than what you normally have to put in there. You just have to put enough to give the meaning to what it is. Now, I try to concentrate more on one side than the other, so we don't have the equality on both sides. I want to go a little bit out to town on this one now. Okay, look at my rigger brush. I can put, if I go like that, it gives me a wider stroke, and if I turn, I get the thinner one. So right now I want to put a thick tree branch in here, so And then I can turn my brush and I get that thinner branch. Make it nice and gnarled. This is losing a lot of its leaves now. See, what I'm doing here is I'm taking the imaginary line down the middle. That's side A and side B. I'm not going to ruin my form. I'm always making the comparison that whatever information I put on that side of the halfway should be dramatically different than on this side. So what's going to make that dramatically different is I have more foliage here, but more branches here. And that becomes an abstract shape. That becomes an entertaining shape when you do that.
Look at how he variegated his colors within that tree.
Yeah, that's the idea. Because you're an entertainer, not a copier. Let nature do her work, you do yours. Yeah, let's just put it.
Aha, he said something really important there. We are an entertainer.
Let's just pretend there's a little stream here or something, just to fill in the blanks. All right, I don't think I need any more branches. I've made my point. The joke's already been told. You don't want to keep saying it over and over again. I think I need a little bit more emphasis here, and then we'll do the negative painting to bring out the darks, and then we're done on this tree. And then I have a little exercise for you. It'll just take a few minutes. Okay, make sure that you don't have the same width on these branches, so this one should be a little bit wider. Okay, so now I'm going to do the negative painting. Start first on the shadow side of the tree. And again, pushing in like this. Hopefully I'll get some of it bleeding and some of it hard-edged. That would be nice. So we get that principle of contrast that we spoke about. So I can be more emphatic at the bottom. Come on, give me some hard edges. Cooperate with me. Hard edges. Give me some hard edges. I think I'm getting them.
So if you're talking to it, does that mean it's still a little damp, Joe?
If I'm what?
If you're talking to it like that, does that mean it's still a little damp?
Well, I'm talking to myself. Oh, talking to you.
No,
I want it to be halfway. I want some of it to be hard edge and other parts not. That would be the best moment to hit it. You get that better with the rough paper.
How do you choose the light source?
Because I'm taking into account that the light's coming from this angle here. So start at the bottom first and then work your way to the top later so you can make the comparison and not go too far. Because nature will give you all these little teeny weeny dots and you have to create a new silhouette, a new symbol. Don't copy trees from nature. That's the worst thing that you can do. And you're going to be done sooner, much sooner than what you think when it comes to this negative painting part to it.
So basically what you're saying is if I have a tree in front of me that I'm going to paint, I kind of drop like a saran wrap over it and combine all those leaves into one brush stroke?
Well, yes. Or one way to pretend is that they're made out of clay, like silly putty, or plastic, like the Michael's store trees, right? They're the little flowers they sell. House plants, and you get a carpenter's torch and you heat it up and all the leaves start to melt together, and then as soon as they start dripping, that's when you pull away the torch. And that will give you the form that you're looking for. Okay, so
Are
I'm
you,
go
are
ahead.
you using a burnt sienna kind of
Yeah,
blue
just
there?
just a darker value of the mother color. Okay, so the secret here is do not, again, we want the principle of contrast. You want these big, large foliage clumps, solid clumps, and then you do the negative painting. So we got like 2/3 light and 1/3 dark. I can reverse that, but for this case, I did it that way. In other words, in nature, you're going to see this kind of technique everywhere. Everything will be negative paint. It's all equal. And but when your symbol, to make it good looking, you leave these large areas here without negative painting and only paint some on the side so that you get that principle contrasts of solid versus some busyness. A very typical example would be this one here. Right, we left a big solid area with a little bit of negative painting there. And there you have the evergreen tree. Evergreen tree. I could put a few leaves here just to give the idea that they're close up. There you have it, folks. There's your watercolor deciduous tree.
Janelle, if he had a little bit more time, he would change the branches to reflect the light source. But this is time right now, a time deterrent.
What I can do is make some of these just darker right under here to get that umbrella effect. I could put here, I'll show you how to negative paint a shadow. So let's suppose we have a cast shadow. This is grass, correct? So we're going to do this, but as you just learned in the video I showed you, we're just going to go like that. And then we just do like 1 inch or so of these grass strands or clumps, and that just gives the idea. Remember, you're working with symbols, not with realism. There, and then that we have our like a convincing shadow here. Isn't that cool? So there's more to say, but when I'm putting these branches in, I'm making sure that the distance from here to here is not the same as from here to here. I'm always looking at my negative space, looking in between my areas. That's my negative space. I'm making sure that I don't take that technique and do it everywhere, so I get my principle of contrast. That's extremely important because, again, and I will emphasize this, in a normal tree, that kind of look there would be also repeated in here, and you're going to ruin your tree that way. So you need these large foliage clumps. Remember, this is a symbol that represents the real object, but not the real object per se. And you know why? Because in nature, a tree is usually 3 stories tall, 2 stories tall. This symbol is only about 8 inches tall. So you have to recreate, since you cannot bring a 2-story tree onto a canvas unless they hire you to paint in an IMAX theater. You can't copy the trees in nature or from photographs because you're contradicting it already. The very fact that you bring something that's, I don't know, maybe 30 yards tall to something that's 8 inches. So your whole scale has changed. So you have to create a new symbol that represents that. Does that make sense? That's why you just can't copy a photograph or something from nature. Okay, before we say goodbye, I have one little exercise that you can do to train yourself to do the negative painting. It works like this. You take a much needed eraser. This is vine charcoal, by the way. Willow charcoal. And you take a kneaded eraser. I call it a much needed eraser. And from an oval, and the reason I start with an oval because that's always a more attractive shape than a circle, you start to carve out. This is a good exercise to train your mind. You're going to feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but eventually your artistic brain will give in. And you start to carve out from this oval your negative shape. It's a very good exercise. It's a drill, Jude.
Yeah. So we're starting to carve out a tree. Is that what you're wanting us to carve out?
Well, we're carving out a silhouette of a tree. So this is it's a training technique that I think you guys should be doing. Oh, I got lucky. I was able to create I keep molding this, by the way.
No, it's great. These little exercises are great. I started doing them, Joe. I know you know that, but I do complain a lot when he makes me do them because he'll tell me I'll have to do 10 of them.
I said 100.
Well, you can tell how many I have.
Don't shortchange me on it. You'll be surprised.
So we have fun in our classes. It's not all just learning. We have fun. We pick on one another. We know our students, and we pick on them a little bit. We have a lot of fun in our class.
Yeah, for example, we got someone from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I talked to her about certain places, that little hidden areas they're painting jewels, and she knows where they are. And yeah, we have a lot of fun. You can see the value of this exercise, correct? You can also do this with oils or acrylics. You just take some white paint with a brush and you paint into the form like this and carve it out. It doesn't have to be with charcoal. And you'll be surprised, as you keep molding this, it just creates these accidental strokes, and you end up without planning exactly what you want, but I end up just being lucky in getting the tree silhouette coming out now. Don't you like this?
My charcoal tree symbols that I practice on, I now have them in my studio to use as examples. They turned out so well.
If I try to do a tree with the vine charcoal or the willow charcoal with the positive shape, chances are I won't end up with all these beautiful different indentations. It'll end up somewhat being symmetrical. So this way, my childhood memory is not there. It's never done this before. So you learn this as a new technique. I think I'm done. That's how fast this was. There.
Now you can take it and take off, put some highlights on it.
Yeah, or I can go darker in some areas, or I can lift up if I get a paper towel like this, I can sort of lift up some of the highlights. But that's not the objective of this exercise. The idea is just to get that silhouette to look so asymmetrical, so abstractly designed. There. That turned out pretty nicely. So I'm comparing both sides to make sure they're different. And Jude, we got these little mini pizza slices, correct? I mean, there has to be a feeling that it's somewhat round without being round. Yes, Doc, I provide you with templates that has all the drawing. See, I can use a paper towel and I can lift up some highlights now. And if you want to draw a tree.
Joe will really tell us in the next class all about pizza slices and how to use them in our tree symbols.
There, so I got some highlights in there, but this is positive painting now, right? Or drawing. See, that's a great exercise that you can do at home. Train your mind to do negative painting. I'll put some darks in here like that, and I'll just emphasize some negative painting here. And we're done. Like I said.
Wow, look at how 3D that is. That looks great.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the willow charcoal somewhat resembles pastels or watercolor. See, now I'm cutting in here and negative painting.
If you want to keep your symbols, you can spray them with fixative, and that will keep them from moving.
That was fun.
So again, Joe's next course is this Saturday, just a couple of days away. It's a one-day course which will enforce everything we've learned, and we will take more time to answer all of your questions and give you little demos if it becomes needed. So we hope that you will join us next Saturday. Sign up at Artist Network.
Well, actually, let them go to improvemypaintings.com because it's a little bit of there's several things there, and they have to go through it to find the right link. So if they go to improvemypaintings.com, it's just directly there. They can click on it to register. It's less confusing. I'll put a few little leaves here and there, and It's hard for me to stop. I'm having a lot of fun. I hate saying goodbye to my students, even in the regular classes. Well, there you go, folks. I think you learned a lot today about negative painting. I felt it was a very successful little tutorial. And I hope to see you next Saturday and in the future. Thanks for coming in and enlivening the chat. I'll sign off now. Don't forget to sign up on our... You know what? Just post the Facebook page there, someone, please, where they can go in there and sign up to stay in touch as well.
Yeah, I did that, but I'll do it again, Joe.
Thank you. All right. Goodbye. Have a nice... see you later. Have a nice day. De nada. Gracias, Manuel, por venir a la